ktorú tu máme v Bratislave alebo v Vajnoroch. Takže áno, aj tieto bilaterálne otázky sme riešili, ale potom sme sa venovali veľmi intenzívne otázkam súvisiacim so situáciou na Ukrajine. Hovorili sme o tom, ako vidíme budúcnosť na Ukrajine, ako asi bude prebiehať konflikt v najbližších týždňoch, mesiacoch a tak ďalej, ale tiež o tom, akým spôsobom vieme spoločne pomôcť Ukrajine, aby sa dokázala brániť proti absolútne neopodstatnenou agresiou, ktorú Ruská federácia voči Ukrajine začala a stále realizujeme. Hovorili sme o tom, akým spôsobom dokážeme nájsť riešenia, ktoré na jednej strane budú znamenať, že Slovensko bude vedieť ďalej pomôcť Ukrajine, ale zároveň my si ponecháme alebo dokonca ešte zlepšíme spôsobilosti obranné. To je to, čomu sa hovorí v medzinárodnom prostredí backfill alebo ringtausch v nemecky hovoriacich krajinách. O tom všetkom sme dnes hovorili, tiež nás čaká ešte niekoľko ďalších rokovaní v tomto smere. Najbližšie sa stretneme asi 11. augusta v Kodani, kde náš dánsky minister organizuje stretnutie, kde budeme doľaďovať ďalšie konkrétne formy pomoci a zároveň náhrad alebo podpory pre tie krajiny, ktoré chcú Ukrajine pomôcť. Hovorili sme tiež o samite NATO, ktorý bol v Madride, o záveroch, ktoré to prináša nielen z hľadiska rozširovania Severoatlantickej aliancie o Švédsko a Fínsko, ale tiež o strategickej koncepcii aliancie a o posilnení východnej hranice Severoatlantickej aliancie. Ben Wallis sa pýtal, ako prebieha výstavba našej mnohonárodnej jednotky, ktorú tu máme, a bavili sme sa o tom, akým spôsobom by potenciálne Veľká Británia mohla prispieť do budovania tejto jednotky. Som veľmi rád, Ben, ešte raz, že si prišiel sem na Slovensko, že si splnil svoj sľub, ktorý si mi dala, že sme mali možnosť sa stretnúť aj takto v priebehu leta a veľmi sa teším na našu ďalšiu spoluprácu.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Teraz poprosím o vyhlásenie britského ministra Bena Wallisa. Nech sa páči.
Thank you, and thank you, Jaroslav, for hosting me here. I can't believe it's 21 years since I wasn't even in Westminster Parliament 21 years ago, and I had more hair. Look, Jaroslav and I have become good friends, both at NATO and indeed in dealing with Ukraine. And I want to commend Slovakia for its leadership. It's very often easy in politics to sit on the fence, and when you have a very threatening Russia as not far away, illegally invading a country, it can be the easy thing to sit on the fence. But I know that Slovakia hasn't. Slovakia has led in Central Europe, and it is one of the leaders in its response against the illegal invasion of Ukraine. And I think that is to be commended. And that leadership is noticed across Europe. It's noticed that when push came to shove, Slovakia was there for all those Ukrainians crossing in fear for their lives as refugees, and Slovakia was also here to help the Ukrainians defend their own country. I think that's a noble thing to do, and Britain joins Slovakia in doing everything we can to make sure that Putin is not a threat to our way of life and not a threat to our own country. And if you sit on the fence with President Putin, he will in the end eat the fence and then eat you. And that is the lesson we have of President Putin in the last 10 years at least. That is why we are all here again after the invasion in 2014, when too many of us didn't do enough to send a message that it was unacceptable. So I think it's right that we take a stand. I'm delighted that I share that role with Slovakia and Jaroslav and his government, and people should be under no illusion that what President Putin wants is not just Ukraine. He wants his influence and his territory far wider than just Ukrainian territory that he claims he is doing a special operation. And for anyone who doubts that, read his article that he wrote himself last July. You'll notice that there's a part of the world near here that he mentions having a view that he really should belong to his greater Russia. So no amount of spin or misinformation can cover his own words in his own article. It was good to discuss today NATO, what more we can do for Ukraine, what more we can do for regional security, what Britain can do to continue and deepen its investment and partnerships with Slovakia, because I think we have more to do. We will be looking at what training we can do. We will be looking at what forces we can send or support Slovakia in the not just in the immediate but in the long term. United Kingdom is known for standing by its friends no matter what the odds are, and it has a reputation of not just being here today, gone tomorrow, but here for the long term. We will continue to support our friends for the long term, both through NATO and through troop deployments and indeed assistance, and I stand ready on behalf of the United Kingdom to help Slovakia with whatever it needs to stand up not only to the aggression on its borders but also for its own 360-degree security in this part of Europe. So thank you, Jaroslav.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne za vaše vyhlásenie a teraz priestor pre vaše otázky, ako pre domáce, tak aj zahraničné redakcie. Nech sa páči, pokojne sa prihláste.
Ďakujem pekne. Rastio Dubovský, Tlačová agentúra SITA. Rád by som sa spýtal, ak môžem, pána britského ministra obrany. Otázka by sa týkala v podstate, čo sa týka, bude po odchode Borisa Johnsona dlhodobo zachované politické status quo Británie v intenzite vojenskej podpory pre Ukrajinu. Jednak čo sa týka samotnej dodávky zbraní a vojenského materiálu a na druhej strane aj čo sa týka výcviku ukrajinských vojakov, ktorý už teda úspešne prebieha na práve území Veľkej Británie.
In Ukraine or United Kingdom?
Na Ukrajine, alebo ste povedali, že prebieha na Ukrajine, ale on prebiehal...
Training Ukrainian soldiers in Ukraine, in the United Kingdom.
Máte na mysli výcvik, ktorý prebieha vo Spojenom kráľovstve?
Áno, tak hej.
In UK.
In Ukraine.
In United Kingdom.
Okay, the translator is giving it. So look, we have all given significant quantities of support in military aid to Ukraine, and over time, as Russia has committed more and more atrocities, the type of weapon systems we have provided have got more sophisticated. So originally we started with handheld weapons, and now we are supplying long-range artillery and armoured vehicles. So it's really important that we train the Ukrainians to use them in the way that we use those weapons, because they are not designed to be fought in a Soviet way, but in a NATO way. So it's really important that we match the hardware with effectively the software, the knowledge. So we have been training both, as have the Dutch and the Germans and many other countries, the Ukrainians in the use of this specialist equipment. Indeed, we even had New Zealanders coming to help the Ukrainians on the artillery. And at the same time, we have helped the Ukrainians in the basic training of their new recruits. We are committed to training 10,000, but we expect to train much more in the United Kingdom. We are bringing them over, they are being trained, and then we send them back for their specialist training by the Ukrainians, however they wish to do that.
Nech sa páči ešte.
Len doplňujúcu otázku, čiže čo sa týka zmeny osoby na premiérskej stoličke v rámci UK, tak nedôjde tam k nejakej zmene a je tam teda tá spoločná vôľa v rámci politického nejakého konsenzu, aby sa pokračovalo v tomto.
Yeah, both candidates to be Britain's next Prime Minister are fully committed to our support for Ukraine. That isn't going to change whichever one is chosen as the next Prime Minister.
Nech sa páči.
Ďakujem pekne, Andrej Matušek, denník Pravda. Pán minister Naď, vy ste povedali, že teda budete ďalej rokovať o tom backfille, o tom, ako, čo by sme, keď to tak zjednodušene poviem, čo by sme mohli dať Ukrajincom a čo my za to dostaneme. Mohli by ste možno povedať viacej, o aké spôsobilosti ide? A ešte jedna otázka vlastne na obidvoch pánov ministrov. Keď hovoríme o týchto spôsobilostiach, pán minister Volis už povedal, že začali sme tým, že sme dávali Ukrajincom ručné zbranie, teraz hovoríme o systému ako HIMARS a o ďaleko delostrelectve, o raketometoch a podobne. Je tento prístup, ako by som povedal, dávať Ukrajincom viac, a je to absolútne potrebné pre nich, ale je tento prístup tak povediac udržateľný? Je to sustainable? Máme dosť takýchto systémov, aby Ukrajina mohla ďalej pokračovať vlastne v tom, že bude proti tej agresii ruskej bojovať? A nie je na konci toho rebríčka pomyselného to, že sa povieme si, že treba poslať vojakov na Ukrajinu? Ďakujem.
Začnem ja. Netajím sa tým, a už som to povedal niekoľkokrát verejne, Slovenská republika je zodpovedný člen Severoatlantickej aliancie a ako zodpovedný člen Severoatlantickej aliancie sa má správať aj z hľadiska spôsobilosti vojenskej techniky, ktorou disponuje. My sme tu zdedili ozbrojené sily, ktoré naozaj neboli v dobrom stave, najmä z hľadiska pozemných síl, ale aj z hľadiska protizdušnej obrany. Zároveň sme mali a stále máme niektoré systémy, ktoré sú pôvodom sovietskej výroby. A dnes v situácii, keď Rusko napadlo Ukrajinu a keď sú mnohé ruské spoločnosti a v obrannom priemysle takmer všetky na sankčnom zozname, je prakticky nemožné udržiavať tieto technológie. Aj preto sme darovali S-300 na Ukrajinu, pretože už aj vlády pred nami, už to bolo povedané niekoľkokrát, deklarovali, že tá S-300 jednoducho už nie je schopná vykonávať úlohy, ktoré vykonávať mala, a ja to opakujem znova, že tomu tak bolo. Navyše sme ju nedokázali opraviť a modernizovať, lebo to dokážu len ruské a ukrajinské spoločnosti a tieto v tomto čase samozrejme robiť nemohli. Zároveň hovorím, a znova to potvrdzujem, lebo aj cez víkend som počul množstvo klamstiev od ľudí, ako je Kaliňák a Pellegrini a mnohí ďalší, že všetko dávame zadarmo. Nie je to pravda. Táto technika je postupne preplácaná našimi spojencami, či už v rámci Európskej únie, alebo niektorými inými na bilaterálnej úrovni. To znamená, áno, aj za tú S-300 my dostaneme preplatené z toho európskeho mierového nástroja, o ktorom sa hovorí v rámci Európskej únie. Ale ostali nám ešte ďalšie typy techniky, ktorá je pôvodom sovietská a ktorá by dnes veľmi pomohla Ukrajine. A môžeme sa rozprávať o tankoch T-72, môžeme sa rozprávať o BVPčkách, teda BMPs po anglicky. Môžeme sa rozprávať o systémoch protizdušnej obrany Igla alebo Kub. To sú systémy, ktoré sú na krátkeho alebo stredného dosahu. To všetko sú pôvodom sovietská technika, s ktorou máme vážny problém a potrebujeme sa jej postupne zbaviť a potrebujeme ju nahradiť štandardnými v Severoatlantickej aliancie používanými technológiami. Zároveň to nemôžeme odozdať len tak, lebo my potrebujeme mať zaistené tie spôsobilosti, preto sa bavíme o tom systéme backfill, alebo teda náhrad za technológie, ktoré my máme, ktoré vieme Ukrajincom poskytnúť, ak nám naši spojenci pomôžu tú techniku nahradiť. A dnes môžem povedať, áno, napríklad v prípade T-72 tankov sme vo finálnej fáze rozhovorov s Nemeckom na náhradu za tanky Leopard 2 a 4. A takýchto možností je viacero. Ja som spomenul, že sa stretneme aj s pánom ministrom Wallisom v Kodani v priebehu augusta, kde sa budeme baviť opäť v nejakom fóre o možnostiach a môžem povedať, že je veľký záujem o ďalší nákup Zuzan 2 húfnic alebo aj nejaké ďalšie techniky, ktorú Ukrajinci potrebujú a ktoré sú naši spojenci a partneri ochotní prefinancovať tak, aby sme to mohli dodať vrátane potrebnej munície na Ukrajinu. Čiže o tomto všetkom sa rozprávame a budeme to o tom informovať v detailoch vtedy, keď to bude zrealizované, pretože tiež to vyžaduje istú mieru informačnej bezpečnosti a tiež to vyžaduje samozrejme aj hovoriť o veciach, ktoré sú dohodnuté a nie o ktorých sa rokuje, lebo to nemá veľký význam. Ale áno, stále hľadáme riešenia, čo urobiť ďalej s tou technikou, ktorú my už viem, že nebudeme používať a na Ukrajine by sa veľmi hodila.
Thank you. Look, just on backfilling, we will stand ready to offer what we can to help Slovakia in its, if it donates what we can do to help. I would happily support with air policing to support, for example, to make sure that Slovakia is strong. And remember, by being NATO, Slovakia is one of 30 nations. That is our difference between Russia and NATO. We have 30 friends, 29 of us are all friends, plus another 2 waiting to come in, Sweden and Finland. And that's a really important message to anybody that would threaten our way of life, that we don't all have everything, none of us do, apart from maybe the United States in our inventory, and that's why we stick together and we will help each other. So if Slovakia needs some backfilling, we are always happy to look at that. Air policing, for example, is one such area. Obviously land forces, we already have an enhanced forward presence here with the Germans and the Czechs and everyone else. So we stand ready to do that.
Ešte ak by som mohol odpovedať na tú udržateľnosť. Samozrejme, že udržateľnosť je základný moment, preto existujú tie formáty, na ktorých sa stretávame a kde rokujeme, napríklad ten tzv. Ramštajnský formát alebo kontaktná skupina pre podporu Ukrajiny, kde presne o tom sa rozprávame, že jednoducho to nie je len o tom, že okamžite pomôcť Ukrajine, to urobili najmä krajiny ako Slovenská republika, ktoré mali takú techniku k dispozícii, ktorou mohli okamžite pomôcť Ukrajine, ale dnes je to už o dlhodobom konflikte a o udržateľnosti tejto pomoci a samozrejme tam prebieha veľké množstvo diskusí, tak aby samozrejme tá pomoc bola udržateľná. A vôbec to nesúvisí s tým, že by sme hovorili, že aliancia vstúpi vojensky do toho konfliktu, ale Ukrajina samozrejme aj v zmysle charty OSN má právo sa brániť proti agresii Ruskej federácie a my ako zodpovedný člen nielen NATO, ale aj OSN si vážime chartu OSN a jednoducho budeme pomáhať krajine, ktorá bola napadnutá, tak ako to budeme vedieť.
Nech sa páči, pani kolegynka.
Thank you. Deborah Haynes from Sky News. The head of the US Air Force last week talked about how the US and allies are open to the possibility of giving warplanes to Ukraine, and he listed airframes like the F-16, the Eurofighter, the Griffin. I was wondering, and also then the Secretary of the Air Force talked about the Warthog, the A-10, and said that open to discussions for older airframes going as well. For the Slovakian Defence Minister, are you going to be giving your MiG-29s to Ukraine? And for the British Defence Secretary, would you be open to giving our Tornadoes, our retired Tornadoes, to Ukraine? Thank you.
Yes, this is a very important question, and it comes very often, especially from the foreign journalists. Yes, we have 11 MiG-29s, and we're planning to ground them, to stop using them by the end of August, most probably. From the 1st of September, we expect our Czech and Polish allies to take over air policing over Slovakia. So since that moment on, immediately when we ground them and Czechs and Poles will take over air policing, we can discuss about the future of MiG-29s. Honestly, it's 11 planes. Each of them is worth approximately 35 million euros. For a country of Slovak size, it's not easy to donate this equipment to Ukraine with no significant either backfill or financial support from our friends and allies. So yes, we're ready to discuss that. Politically, we are open for discussion to donate those MiG-29s to Ukrainians, but certainly this will require, I would say, a broader discussion, also taking into account financial aspect and all other aspects of this kind of delivery. So no decision has been made yet. No discussion are taking place as of now, and we're ready to discuss that later on. Should there be this kind of proposal or wish from some of our allies, friends, or from Ukraine? But politically, yes, I can tell you that there is, I would say, positive attitude of helping Ukrainians with MiG-29s.
So first of all, the problem is, unlike a handheld weapon, which you can learn in a few days, you cannot learn overnight how to fly a Tornado, or indeed, some of those other capabilities. I think, and it might be, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of the, like A-10s, for example, the Ukrainians have some pilots that have trained on that, I think. So I don't think it's possible, and secondly, we have decommissioned our Tornadoes some time ago, so I don't think it is likely. But I think to both your question and the previous journalist's question, we have to ask ourselves how we got here. Why is it we started with handheld weapons, and the international community is now prepared to continue sending bigger weapons? It's all because of Russia's behavior, its determination to commit atrocities, to knowingly engage in rape and war crimes and destruction, that elicits a response. I took a decision to put in short-range anti-aircraft missiles to the Ukrainians after the Russians indiscriminately bombed civilian areas, killing innocent civilians. There will be a response to Russian atrocities from the West. That's why we're now in a position where public opinion across the West supports us putting in longer-range artillery. That's why public opinion understands the need even more to protect Ukraine or allow Ukraine to defend itself. And I think, people in the Kremlin should remember why we are where we are. And when we saw within 24 hours of them signing a so-called agreement on grain, we saw the Russians bombing the port of Odessa. Perhaps Russia should ask itself why no one currently trusts them, and no one really believes that they are capable of conducting any form of operation with regard to human rights and the rules, the international rule of law. And that's why people in the West, not just in NATO, as far afield as Australia, New Zealand and countries right on the other side of the earth, consider assisting Ukraine in military aid. For now, Britain is not providing aircraft, but also that's because we recognise the best aircraft that we can help the Ukrainians acquire, the ones who are already trained on.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne, nech sa páči, priestor pre vás.
Good afternoon, Jerome Starkey from the Sun newspaper. A question for both of you. A couple of days ago, the head of Britain's Foreign Intelligence Service, Richard Moore, said he thought that the Russian offensive was about to run out of steam, that Russian forces were going to have to pause, and that this would be an opportunity for Ukraine to counterattack. I wondered if you could expand on that, on what you see as the situation on the ground, and also, is this good news or bad news? Is this a temporary pause, or are they permanently exhausted? Are they simply going to restock, resupply, and launch another offensive and blast their way through more territory?
What is the fact is that Russia has failed in all its major objectives since February 24th. It has lost thousands, if not tens of thousands, of its own service personnel. It has committed nearly 65 to 70% of its land forces to the invasion of Ukraine and promptly lost or had destroyed or below combat effectiveness nearly 50% of that. So it has worn its army out. It's killed, or it's caused the death of tens of thousands of its own soldiers because of poor leadership and because they chose to invade a country illegally, who quite rightly chose to defend itself. It is in a difficult position. We already see munitions designed to shoot down aircraft now being fired as ground targets, which of course is never the right use of those weapon systems. We see it getting ever more desperate, the use of Wagner, the use of mercenaries and ill-trained troops. We see the deaths, significant deaths of its commanders. It is in a very sorry state. However, unlike us in the West, its leadership doesn't seem to care about either its population or indeed its soldiers, and therefore it gives it the ability to continue to prosecute a war where all of us here would have long previously had to stop and reassess or indeed withdraw. If that had been on our watch, we probably wouldn't be standing here as defence ministers if that had been the issue. So Russia is still dangerous. He is still determined to take the whole of Ukraine. Only I think yesterday Lavrov decided to rephrase the special operations to include some new targets, as he called it. They're not having any success. They're grinding on very slowly, but nevertheless they are a very dangerous enemy of the people of Ukraine, and they will continue to do what it can. Do the Western weapon systems help? Absolutely. They have made it even harder for the Russians to make any progress, but actually at the heart of this is the Russian resistance and the moral component that gives the Ukrainian moral component and a Ukrainian bravery that has given them the power to stop some areas of massively outnumbered force. So I think it isn't going the right way for President Putin. It's certainly internationally gone the wrong way. He is not even near the battle to occupy Ukraine. He is supposed to be trying to invade it. He thought he'd do that in a couple of weeks. We're now coming towards the end of July for an invasion that has fundamentally failed. It is our job, and anyone who stands for the rule of law and the human rights that we all believe in, to assist Ukraine to make sure that whatever Russia has currently occupied in Donetsk, etc., is not permanent and that it gets pushed back. I think Ukrainians are capable of doing that. They have some of the weapon systems able to do it, but it is a matter for the Ukrainians. That's what we're all here for, is to allow them from a position of strength to decide what it wants to do next. It is not for me to micromanage the Ukrainians and tell them what their next steps is. That is the freedom of a sovereign state, which is ultimately what we're here to protect.
Perhaps
Absolutely, and let me just continue from the point where Ben finished his intervention. Was, as a matter of fact, we have a Ukrainians angle on this Russian aggression, then world communities angle, and then we have our own Slovak. We are a neighboring country of Ukraine. We are frontline state, which is completely new situation to Slovakia. Being on eastern flank of NATO, we have to focus very much on territorial defense of our country. And the worst thing that could happen to Slovakia is to have Russia as our neighbor. Therefore, it is also our national interest to do our best in order to help Ukrainians to defend their territory, to defend their country. Together with our allies and other partners and friends across the world, I think it's 150 countries that are standing on the Ukrainian side, and more than 50 are militarily contributing to help Ukrainians, including Slovakia and UK, obviously. So whether this will take weeks, months, or years is difficult to say. I think it will be a long-term conflict, maybe from some pauses or breaks when both sides will trying to focus on the goals they would have. Ben is absolutely right when he says that Russia has not fulfilled neither of their goals they had from the beginning, and they're changing still objectives, but are not fulfilling their expectations. And I think, I hope this will continue in months to come, and that Ukraine, with the support of all the countries that are helping Ukrainians, will eventually win this war, will fight back this Russian aggression, unprovoked Russian aggression, and I hope Ukraine will keep the territory as it was before 2014.
Dobrý deň, Ladislav Žik.
Počkáme chvíľočku na preklad. Nech sa páči, môžete sa pýtať. Ďakujem.
Dobrý deň, Ladislav Žigo, televízia Teatry. Peter Pellegrini sa včera na vaše meno, pán minister obrany slovenský, vyjadroval dosť netradične. Hovoril o predraženom nákupe vozidiel 8x8, že neboli nakúpené formou súťaže. Tak keby ste mohli niečo k tomuto povedať. Ďakujem.
Som ochotný vám odpovedať na tieto otázky, ale prosím vás, nie vtedy, keď tu mám zahraničnú návštevu, ale keď ste sa už opýtali, tak vám na to odpoviem. Peter Pellegrini by mal byť absolútne ticho, keď sa hovorí o predražených nákupoch v rezorte obrany za vlády Smeru, či už jednofarebnej, alebo predtým z HZDS a z SNS, alebo potom z SNS a Mostom sa tu diali také zlodejiny, že keď príde spravodlivosť na konci dňa, tak ľudia ako Peter Pellegrini sa už viac nebudú pozerať do krabíc od 100 000 eur, ktoré dostávali podľa vyjadrení rôznych svedkov, ale budú sa pozerať spoza mreží. Peter Pellegrini, rovnako ako Robert Kaliňák, by mali ostať ticho a len sa modliť, takisto ako robia teraz všetko preto, aby táto vláda padla, aby spravodlivosť neprišla. To je jediná cesta, ako oni sa môžu dostať do situácie, že neskončia vo väzení, lebo veľmi dobre vedia, čo oni robili. To, že Peter Pellegrini obviňuje mňa z nejakých korupčných aktivít, mi príde absurdné, pretože keď niekto tu realizoval celé roky korupčných aktivít, tak to boli vlády Smeru, kde Peter Pellegrini bol jedným z príjemcov 100 000 eur v krabiciach od šampanského, ako svedkovia vypovedajú. Takže Peter Pellegrini nech ostane ticho, nech chodí na dúhové pochody, myslím, že som ho tam nevidel, asi tam mal byť, a nech sa radšej sústredí na veci, ktoré sú mu blízke. Obrana to určite nie je. Keď niekedy s obranou niečo riešili, tak to boli len veci, ktoré sa týkali rôznych zlodejín, ktoré tu realizovali. A prosím naozaj všetkých slovenských novinárov, aby mi tieto otázky kladli vtedy, keď tu nemám zahraničnú návštevu. Ja veľmi rád na tieto otázky zodpoviem.
Ak máme ešte nejakú otázočku, tak poslednú poprosím vzhľadom na čas. Nech sa páči.
Jan Šilan, Česká televize. My question goes to Secretary Wallace. To what extent is Great Britain ready to provide security for Slovakian territory in terms of military personnel as well as technique? I know you've already spoken about it, but can you provide any specific numbers? Thank you.
For Slovakia?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we are all committed to the ultimate defence, which is Article 5 of NATO, that we help each other no matter what in an act of aggression. So, everyone should take that as a read, that fundamentally all members of NATO are for each other. So, and that involves the ultimate commitment to British soldiers coming to defend Slovakia. In the meantime, and we hope we never get to an Article 5, we'll work together to see what we can do. We already have some people here in the planning space for the NATO integration unit. We'll explore what more is needed in the operational sense. So I've talked about air policing, if that is required. I know that currently at the moment the Polish and the Czechs have talked about doing that, but we stand ready to do that. I've only just brought back some airplanes from Romania that was doing Black Sea policing, and they are obviously available to do that. And we'll always talk about other units, either coming here and exercising, and we do that, or whether we come here and look at the enhanced forward presence. At the moment, there's a battle group that's not required any extra troops from us, but we always stand ready to see what happens. I think the next 6 months are quite important as NATO makes its regional plans and starts to set out how it's going to contain Russia, how it's going to provide resilience and reassurance, and that will go right from the very high north of the Arctic Circle all the way down to Turkey. And I think we all have a role to play in that, and how that will look. I think we leave to the Supreme Allied Commander Europe to make his plan.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ak už, pán minister, nechcete nič dodať, tak touto otázkou sme ukončili teda našu tlačovú konferenciu. My budeme pokračovať v ďalšom programe. Ďakujeme páni za všetky informácie. Vám ďakujeme za účasť a prajeme ešte pekný deň. Dovidenia.
Ďakujem pekne.
Thank you.